Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. Happy New Year to everyone. I hope you all had a fabulous holiday. So this is our first tutorial for the year and is a requested video from one of you. In this tutorial, I'll be sharing the changes I made to mine as we draft and sew along so that you will know the best way to go about yours. For those of you who may not be able to watch the whole tutorial, I'll also be sharing how to get that bustier effect by just using ordinary dart. So do not forget to like and share the video, and let's get started. For this tutorial, I'll be working with my basic bodice pattern. We'll also be drafting on the fabric using this black cotton lining for those who like to draft directly on the fabric. I have here my front and back basic bodice for a size M. My front basic bodice is contoured, meaning all excess has been removed at the center front and around the neck area. Then my back bodice. I find it more convenient working with patterns because you get to make any correction or modification on the pattern before you transfer to your fabric, which you do not get when you draft directly on the fabric. So I've traced these patterns out on this paper, and that's what we are going to work with. To mark the neck depth of this blouse, from my bust point, I will go up by my bust radius plus half an inch. My bust radius is 3.5 inches plus half inch, making it 4 inches because I want full coverage. So you go ahead and do the same with your measurement. If you want to show cleavage, you remove some inches from your bust radius. If you want full coverage, you mark either your bust radius or you add some inches to it. So I'll take this measurement and square out that point. This line now becomes my chest line. On this line, I'm going to place half of my armpit to armpit measurement minus 2 inches. My armpit to armpit measurement is 13 inches minus 2 inches, that's 11 inches. And half of that is 5.5 inches. So I will take that measurement. This is one of the changes I made. Instead of the 5.5 inches, I used my bra strap to bra strap measurement of 5 inches to get the neckline laid the way I wanted it. So you use your bra strap to bra strap measurement here. From the armhole, I will come down by 1 inch. You can come down by half an inch. I will square that out a little. And with my French ruler, I will go in and draw in my neckline and my armhole curve. On the dart line of the waistline, from the bust point, I came down at 0.75 inch. If you're really small busted, you come down by half an inch. If you're fully busted, 1 inch is fine. And redraw your dart legs. Just make sure your dart does not fall at the tip of your bust when you sew it. This was all I did for my front panel. If you want yours to be bustier, all you have to do is to take the dart line up to the chest level, draw in the under bust level, and draw in your dart intake. So I'll go ahead and add seam allowance around this, but before then, let's work on the back panel. From my back armhole level, I'm going to go up by 2.5 inches and I'll square out that point. For those who would like more coverage on the upper part of their back, especially those that their bra band is always higher, use your back chest level. Then if you want yours more revealing, use the armhole level. This line now will serve as my back chest level. On this line, I'm going to place half of my back armpit to armpit measurement minus 2 inches. So this was another change that I made. Instead of using the 6 inches armpit to armpit measurement on the back, I used the 5 inches bra strap to bra strap measurement. So please take note of that. Just like we did on the front bodies, from the armhole, I will come down by 1 inch, and with my French curve, I will draw in my back armhole curve. The back panel of this top has no dart and my bodice has a dart allowance. So I'm going to place 1/4 of my waist circumference without a dart allowance and join my side seam. To draw the shape of the back tie, from the center back I came up by 2.5 inches This is not standard. You can decide to go up by 3 inches. It all depends on how you want your back to be shaped. Then the width of my tie is 3 inches. That's the width of my belt. And then with this point, I just went in with my French curve and drew in the shape of the back tie. This is what my back panel is looking like so far. So from the 2.5 inches point that I went up at the center back, I connected it to the side seam of the waistline. And then from the 3 inches point of the width of my belt, I connected it to my half of my back armpit to armpit measurement of 6 inches. Then I'm going to extend it to the length to how long I want my belt to be. This top, I'll not be using a lining for it. So if you're making yours with a lining, this next step is not for you. So if you're sewing yours without a lining and you do not want the raw edges of your belt to show, your back panel is going to be in 2 pieces. So you're going to make use of your dart line, that's your nipple to nipple measurement, and you're going to divide it from there. So the side that will be attached to the front panel will be without lining, and the side of the belt is where you're going to add a lining, meaning you're going to cut 2 pieces of that. You're going to use one of the pieces as the lining to turn out the main fabric to get a neat finish. So guys, I've done that on my pattern. I have labeled my 1 and 2 for easy identification. I'll go ahead and add seam allowance and cut out my pattern. This is what my pattern is looking like. I'll be adding the 1/2 inch seam allowance for joining on my fabric when I cut this out. This is what yours should look like if you're sewing without a lining. But if you're sewing with a lining, your back panel will be a whole piece. This line will serve as the center front line for my front bodice, and on this line I will come down at 4 inches. Remember, my bust radius is 3.5 inches and I added extra 1/2 inch for full coverage. So I will take that measurement and I'll square out that point. This line now is my bust point level. So from this bust point level, I will go up now by 4 inches. My bust radius, that is the height of my neck depth to my bust point. I will square out that point and that line becomes my front chest level. My bust point level is 11 inches. That is the highest point of my shoulder to the tip of my bust is 11 inches. So I'm going to place my tape at 11 inches on the bust point level and take my front half length of 17 inches. On the bust point level, I will place 1/4 of my bust measurement, and on the front chest level, I will place half of my armpit to armpit measurement. So just like I explained earlier, instead of the armpit to armpit measurement, use your bra strap to bra strap measurement for the front and back pattern. And with these 2 points, I drew in my front armhole curve. On the waistline, I placed 1/4 of my waist circumference plus 1 inch dart allowance. On the same line, I placed half of my bust span of 4 inches, and on this point, I took my 1 inch dart intake. On the bust point level, I placed half of my bust span of 4 inches and connected it to that on the waistline with a straight line. Then from the bust point level, I came down by 0.75 inch so that when I sew up my dart, it will not fall directly on the tip of my bust. I drew in my dart legs and connected the side seam. So that's all for the front pattern. If you want your front pattern to be a bustier, you go ahead and mark your under bust level, extend the dart line to the chest line and draw in your dart intake. For the back panel, I have extended the bust point level line, and this straight line is going to serve as my center back line. On this line, I will place 1/4 of my bust measurement. So I'll go ahead and extend the waistline of the front to the back as well. From this bust point level or armhole level, I'm going to go up by 3 inches. If you want more coverage on the upper part of your back, you can go up to 5 inches. If you want your back to be more revealing, you don't have to go up by anything, just draw your back tie from this bust point or armhole level. I'll square out that point and this line becomes my back chest level. And on this line, I'm going to place half of my back armpit to armpit measurement. My back armpit to armpit measurement is 14 inches, so I minus 2 inches from it, giving me 12 inches, and half of 12 inches is what I marked. With my curve ruler, I'm going to connect that point to the bust measurement on the bust point level for my back armhole curve. The back panel of this top has no dart, so on the waistline I place 1/4 of my waist circumference with no dart allowance, and I drew in my side seam. So for the shape of the back tie, from the center back line I came up by 2.5 inches. This is not standard. You're going to determine how open you want that area to be, and I went ahead to mark the width of my belt of 3 inches, and with my curve ruler I drew in the shape of my back tie. So from the width of your belt, you're going to extend it to how long you want your belt to be. Like I earlier mentioned, if you're making this top and you're cutting out a lining, your back panel is going to come out in one piece as you're seeing it now. But if you're not making yours with a lining and you don't want the raw edges of the belt of your back top to show, your back panel is going to come in 2 pieces. On the center back of your back panel, you're going to mark your nipple to nipple measurement and divide the pattern into 2. The side that will be joined to the front panel is going to be without lining, and the side of the belt you're going to cut with a lining. So that's all for it for the pattern drafting. I'll go ahead and cut out my pieces and we'll move on to the sewing part. So guys, I'll be using this Ankara for the top, and I used 3 meters to make mine. Because of how my Ankara is patterned, I can cut on all sides, so consider that, otherwise you'll be needing more than 3 meters. I have cut out all the pieces for the top, and on the neckline of the front I used 0.75 inch seam allowance, and on the back as well. I'm not adding any form of interfacing to this. This is the other side of the bag that has the belt extension. I have 4 pieces of that for both sides, the main fabric and the lining. The length of the belt from the center back here is 33 inches, but I later increased it to 50 inches. Then I have this rectangle for the gathers. This rectangle I cut along the width of Ankara. You know, Ankara is by 45, so I cut along that. I cut 3 pieces of this, so each piece measured 45 inches. So I'm going to split one of the pieces to join to the other 2 pieces to have a long rectangle for the gathers. I have my elastic, then another rectangle for the sleeve. The length measured 40 inches by 17 inches, and this includes seam allowance. We'll start by shaping the sleeve. The length of the sleeve measured 40 inches and the width measured 17 inches. I have folded the fabric in half and I'm cutting for both sleeves. So I'm going to measure the armhole circumference of the front bodice and that of the back, and here they both measured the same. So I'm going to use this measurement to shape the armhole of the sleeve. I'll go ahead and mark 1 inch elastic allowance on both sides of the sleeve. Then from the elastic line, I'm going to come down at 3 inches and go in by 4 inches and connect this point. Once I measure and it corresponds with the armhole circumference of the bodice, I will fold in the elastic line and cut it out. So guys, we're going to assemble all the pieces together. We're going to start off by sewing close the darts on the front bodice, the waist dart, the bust dart, then turning out the belt on the back panel and assembling it together. So guys, I've done all that I mentioned. I've sewn close the darts and I've finished off the neckline of the front bodice, and you can see how my front bodice is shaped. I also went ahead and joined one part of the back bodice, and you can see how neat the belt area is. This is how I'm able to minimize wastage, because if you be cutting this back pattern in a hole, you'll be wasting a lot of fabric. So I'll go ahead and join the other side of the back panel. I have assembled the other side of the back panel and zigzag stitch raw edges. Now before we assemble the back to the front panel, we are going to work on the sleeve. I'm going to come in by 4 inches at the hem of my sleeve, just like we did at the shoulder while drawing in our armhole curve. Then I'll connect it back to the armhole. You can leave yours if you want more fullness at the bottom of your sleeve. Then I'll go ahead and sew in the elastic channels and connect my elastic. So guys, I've prepared the sleeves and have attached my elastic. Now we are going to assemble the sleeves to the bodice. So guys, I've attached the sleeves and this is what our top is looking like. The top is gradually coming together. The next thing we're going to do is to work on the gathers. Like I earlier mentioned, I cut 3 pieces of these and I cut along the width of the Ankara. So each piece measured 45 inches by, and I've split one of the piece into 2 to add to the front and back panel, and I did that using a French seam. The total length of the rectangle measured about 68 inches. The width of the front panel measured 9.5 inches, and this includes 1 inch seam allowance, while the width of the back measured 10.5 inches, and this includes seam allowance for the elastic and for the hem. So on the front panel, I'm going to run gather stitches and gather it, and on the back panel, I'm going to gather it with an elastic. The width of the elastic I ended up using for the back measured 0.75 inch. I've prepared both rectangles. The gathered piece is for the front panel, while the one gathered with an elastic is for the back panel, and they are both gathered to my waist circumference. I'll go ahead and pin it in place to show you how I'll be attaching the pieces. With the right side of the gathers to the right side of the top, I will pin them at their seam allowance there. This is what your front panel will look like when you attach both pieces together. Now you're going to attach the back piece to the front gathers. You're going to place the back piece on the seam line that joined the top to the gathers, not with the seam allowance included, on the seam line that joins the top to the gathers. So you're going to attach on both sides with a straight stitch. So guys, this is what your top will look like when you're done. I will take this to my machine and attach with a straight stitch, and I'll show you guys the review. So guys, this is me wearing the top, and these are the changes that I made. First, I increased the length of the belt. The length of the belt from the center back measured 33 inches, so I increased it to 50 inches. I changed the back panel because I wanted more coverage for my butt, so I increased the width from 8.5 inches to 12 inches. I went ahead and tightened the underbust using my underbust measurement. You can as well do bustier if you're very good with that. I reduced the elastic I used around the shoulder from 14 inches to 11 inches. I will also take out the ½ inch on both sides of the neckline and 1 inch on the back neckline as well. The last thing I did was to change the elastic around the arm and on the shoulder to a smaller one so that the puffiness of the sleeve can flow. So on the shoulder I used the elastic of 0.25 inch in width, and on the arm I used elastic less than 0.25 inch in width. So guys, I've opened the waistline of the top around the dart area, and if you remember on when we're drafting our pattern, I came down from my bust point to draw in my dart by 0.75 inches, which is what I've marked here. So from that point, I'm going to come down at 3.5 inches my bust radius to get my under bust level. Once I get my under bust level, I will measure the circumference of my under bust on this top. My under bust is 30 inches and half of that is 15, but here on the top I have 18 inches. So from our measurement, we have a difference of 3 inches which will be taken out. So on each dart leg on the under bust level, I have marked 1 inch dart intake, making it 2 inches. So the remaining 1 inch I will be taking out by the side, ½ inch on both sides. This ½ inch is taken out only on the front bodies. The back bodies remain the same. On the side seams, I pushed out ½ inch on the under bust level of the front panel and repinned my back panel on that point. I went in with a pen to reshape the dart, connecting it from the dart point to the underbust level and back to my waistline. On the front neckline, I'll remove 1/2 inch on both sides. Then on the back neckline as well, I'm going to remove 1 inch. On the pattern, we use 5.5 inches for our half armpit to armpit measurement. So I'm going to remove that 1/2 inch and redraw the front armhole. Then on the back panel, we use 6 inches, but I'm going to use the same 5 inches and redraw the armhole. When you measure the distance from the side of the neckline to the 5 inches point, here I have 1.75 inches. And when you measure from on the fabric from where I pinned to the side of the neckline, I also have 1.75 inches. So I'm going to make this correction on the top for the back neckline, following the way I corrected it on the pattern, and for the front neckline as well. Another change I made, which I will talk you through while I sew the dart, is that I changed the back panel. I increased the length from 8.5 inches to 12 inches because I wanted it to cover my butt a little. So that's why you have that high-low effect, but do what's comfortable for you. So guys, I've sewn the dart and the bustier is already popping. This is another trick way to get that bustier effect without actually doing a bustier. So I'll go ahead and trim down the seam allowance or the dart allowance to 0.5 inch. Then I'm going to notch around those cuffed areas so that my bustier can slip. So guys, you can see the bustier effect without us actually doing a bustier. If you have problem with sewing a bustier, this is another clever way of going about it. So to complete the snatching round under the underbust, I will go ahead and sew in the 1/2 inch we took out on both sides of the seam. Please bear in mind that this 1/2 inch was only taken out on the front bodice. Another change that I made, which I will talk you through while I sew the side seam, is that I changed the elastic of the sleeve. The elastic around the shoulder I used 0.25 inch, and around the arm I used an elastic less than 0.25 inch. So guys, I'm done sewing close the side seam. I'll go ahead and attach it back to the gathers. For the neckline and the rest of the things I mentioned, like changing the elastics and the back panel, I'll be doing all that off camera and I'll show you guys the final look. So guys, this is the final review. I hope this tutorial gives you all the info you need to recreate yours. And do not forget to like and share the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in my next one. A bientôt!